Welcome, everyone, to the final day of the National Bike Summit. This is Bill Nesper again, Executive Director of the League of American Bicyclists. It's lobby day, and I know you are all having great meetings already as we climb Capitol Hill together online today. I'm sure you're as thrilled as I am about our next speakers. Thanks again to all of you for the work you've done these last few days and representing the people of your communities, states, and country when you meet your members of Congress today. We're proud to be able to make these meetings possible and to be working with you at this incredibly important moment. Thanks to all of our sponsors again for making the National Bike Summit possible. There's still time in your off times today to visit sponsors and exhibits. You know, there's connections to still be made, conversations to still be part of, resources to be found, and even deals to be had. So I want to make sure you know that. And also very special thanks once again to our platinum sponsors, Lyft and Uber, and gold level sponsors, the Federal Highway Administration, Lime, and People for Bikes. Just a reminder to view this session in Zoom whenever possible for the best experience. Closed captioning is available, and we're fortunate enough to have Stephen here interpreting for us again today. Please keep the conversations going on the Whova app. Our first speaker needs little introduction. I'm sure you, like me, felt the surprise and excitement and the possibilities of seeing a U.S. Secretary of Transportation riding a bike share bike home from work, just going by bike like millions of Americans do every day. Not for a photo op, but for a sensible way to get around. Clearly, our new secretary knows the pleasure of riding bikes and how convenient biking can be when a city has made the investments in quality infrastructure and having convenient bike share options available for people. Pete Buttigieg currently serves as the 19th Secretary of Transportation. Prior to joining the Biden-Harris administration, Secretary Buttigieg served 2 terms as mayor of his hometown in South Bend, Indiana. A graduate of Harvard University and a Rhodes Scholar at Oxford, Buttigieg served for 7 years as an officer in the U.S. Navy Reserve, taking a leave of absence from the mayor's office for deployment in Afghanistan in 2014. 10 years ago, in 2011, Secretary Buttigieg was elected mayor of South Bend on a platform focused on a transformative vision of the future for the city, with a fresh approach to politics and a fresh face. Soon known as Mayor Pete, Buttigieg worked across the aisle on projects that would change and improve people's lives every day. During his tenure as mayor, household income grew, poverty fell, and unemployment was cut in half. One of the projects many of us here know well was Buttigieg's Smart Streets initiative, which put people back into the vision for downtown South Bend by rethinking road design and in historically under-resourced West Side. You won't be surprised to learn that this complete street strategy led to benefits that included small business growth, along with previously neglected corridors, and hundreds of millions of dollars in new private investment in the once emptying downtown. Plus, people walking, biking, pushing strollers, and using wheelchairs, reclaiming their rights to public space. And this also earned the city a silver level bicycle-friendly community designation. So much can be accomplished in 10 years with leadership that prioritizes people. We have leaders that have leaders that put people at the center of the work. We know that we can make progress towards realizing our vision of a nation where everyone enjoys the benefits and opportunities of bicycling. At the League of American Bicyclists, we're on a mission to build a bicycle-friendly America for everyone by working with individuals, communities, businesses, and our 1,200 state and local partner organizations to make bicycling safe, comfortable, and accessible for people of all ages and abilities. Today, we welcome the new leader of the U.S. Department of Transportation, a historic role. On February 2nd, 2021, Secretary Buttigieg became the first openly gay person confirmed to serve in a president's cabinet. Please join me in welcoming U.S. Secretary of Transportation, Pete Buttigieg.
Thanks a lot, Bill, and thanks to the League of American Bicyclists for your work and for the chance to join you today. I know that you've already had a chance to engage with a lot of members of our team here at DOT, and I'm glad to hear you're engaging so much on the Hill as well. So I appreciate the chance to be able to virtually swing by. I really just want to thank you for everything that you do. You know, bikes have been one of those bright spots as we've been getting through this last year, I think. And a lot of us have been rediscovering how we get around to the extent that we still can. And during this very challenging time, we saw a lot of Americans returning to biking for the first time since childhood. Some were doing it to escape boredom, some to stay fit, some to have a physically safe and socially distanced way to engage with others, or to get around, or to get to work, for those who still needed to work in person. And all of that, I think, reflects a payoff of groundwork that you have been laying for many years, as you have stood for more bike lanes, protected bike lanes, bike parking, bike share, equity, all of the things that you work on. And so I want you to know that you have many partners and champions here in the department, and I'm one of them. I don't have to tell you that when streets are safer for cyclists and pedestrians, quality of life improves for everybody. We saw that in South Bend for sure, where the changes that we made, with a lot of support and encouragement from US DOT, really was a big part of the turnaround, the economic turnaround in underinvested corridors and in our urban core. In 2014, we were part of Secretary Fox's Mayor's Challenge for Safer People, Safer Streets, and were recognized for the work that we did on Complete Streets. And that kind of moral authority, that kind of top cover, went a long way as I was persuading some tough customers in my own community, who have since, thankfully, often become converts once they see it and can't believe it was any other way. And in the course of that initiative, I also had the chance to travel with Secretary Fox and mayors from Austin and Portland overseas. We visited 3 of the cities best known for biking: Copenhagen, Amsterdam, and Oslo, and came back from that really inspired by how great infrastructure and bike culture and conscious, intentional choices in countries that used to be as car dependent as we are in many ways can keep people moving through winters that were at least as cold as what we had in South Bend. I learned a Danish saying: there's no such thing as bad weather, just bad clothing. And they would say that as they got on their bikes and pedaled off to the grocery store in a Nordic winter. So we knew that we could do more back at home. And we were very proud a couple of years later when the League named us as one of the most bike-friendly communities in our area in South Bend. So it's great to be partnering with you in a new way. I'm part of this administration because I believe in the moment that we have a once-in-a-generation opportunity right now to build our entire infrastructure and economy back better than it was before. We've got this moment on our hands to modernize and revitalize our infrastructure, to lift up communities that have been left behind too often, to tackle the climate crisis, to deliver equity, and to support American small businesses and workers and families in a competing global economy. And I think that biking and walking play really important roles in that vision. We know that we've got to stay first and foremost focused on safety. We're going to make sure that it is safer for all Americans to travel, whether you're on foot or in a wheelchair, car, bus, certainly bike. And again, we've seen in this past year more and more Americans interested in riding a bike. So we got to make sure they now feel comfortable doing so on a regular basis, something that, if we get it right, is also part of our climate imperative. Now, honestly, the US has not always had the best track record when it comes to equitably distributing resources and transportation investments. In fact, there are a lot of examples where federal transportation policies made it worse, in reinforcing racial and economic inequality, dividing and isolating neighborhoods, putting people who walk or bike or take transit at peril, who are disproportionately people of color or lower income or essential workers. So we know that we have a lot to answer for and a lot of work to do, but we have a lot of promise here too. And I'm very committed to the Biden-Harris administration's priorities around equity in particular, particularly through Justice 40, which is named because it's an initiative to deliver 40% of the overall benefits of the investments we make to disadvantaged communities. And I'm very excited about the nerdier dimensions of this job as well. So I know a lot of folks here will understand what I'm saying and hopefully welcome the news when I share that we have extended the public comment period on the famous MUTCD, the Manual on Uniform Traffic Control Devices, which is such a powerful, if obscure, document. And it's due for the most comprehensive update in more than a decade. And as you know, it sets national standards on traffic signs, signals, markings on all US roads open to public travel. So it plays a foundational role in safety. And it's very important to the kinds of things I think we want to work together on, which is one reason why we thought it was important to get enough time to get everybody's feedback and make sure that's incorporated in the policy choices ahead. So it's just one example of many opportunities I see for us to work together. And I'm really looking forward to learning more about the priorities that the League has identified starting today. So look forward with as much time as we have left to a bit of a discussion too.
Well, thanks so much. You went right to the MUTCD. I really appreciate all your remarks. I think we'll start general first and really get to a little bit of what you mentioned at the beginning. I mean, your role as a mayor was huge, and the way that Secretary Fox's Mayor's Challenge helped move things along there. I think a lot of people, when they think about cities and towns that are embracing biking, um, they might think about New York or DC or Austin or Portland. Probably don't think about South Bend, but you all oversaw some impressive changes that we got to see. We were really, really happy to see those things happen as they were going, and as you developed as a bicycle-friendly community. But now, obviously, better biking and walking is good politics for you as a mayor, because, like, look where you are now, right? So we know it's a good thing. What lessons can bike advocates learn from your experience on how to bring better biking to places that look more like South Bend than San Francisco, let's say?
Yeah, I mean, part of what we set out to do is demonstrate that smaller communities, Midwestern communities, communities in more politically conservative areas had just as much to benefit from good bike policy as anywhere else. So we really presented complete streets the way we saw it, which was as a quality of life issue. That better access to biking and walking was fundamental to quality of life in South Bend. And as we pursued that, we knew there was a lot of convincing to do. But it was part of how we were opening up a process that everybody could participate in to create a city that brought everybody to the table and explain why it was good for residents, why it was good for businesses. We talked about the need to attract and retain younger residents who have an expectation of being able to get around without having to jump in a car and drag 2 tons of metal with them anytime they're going anywhere. But the community outreach was very important. Talking to local government leaders, talking to interest groups, talking to residents, hearing from residents, and of course the role that advocates played was very important. So all of that outreach came together, and it helped us identify the design improvements that were needed. And we had to do it with a little bit of humility too. And so, I came roaring in with my ideas about what we ought to do, but frankly, it was better after some people slowed me down and made me think about other things. And that's where that open process of dialogue pays off. It feels like a lot of blood and sweat when you're in the middle of it, but when you take people seriously and incorporate their concerns, you're much more likely to be able to turn skeptics into converts. And one of my favorite things about this area of policy is that's so often what happens.
That's awesome. Yeah, thinking about you roaring in as a mayor, that is really part of the key ingredients to a lot of bicycle friendly communities around the country, the places that are making these investments. So how do we get more mayors roaring and going into that? Yes, hopefully being with humility and realizing that that you need to bring everybody in. But how do we get mayors that are that might not bike themselves, might not get it, might not want to, do deep dives into guidance manuals. How do we help advocates? And we have, 1,100 advocates from around the country. How do we help them reach their mayors, and how can you help from your position, to do that?
So I think the good news is more and more mayors get it. There's a sense that even if they're not into bikes as such, they understand that safety is critical, and safer streets for biking and walking are good for the growth of the community. I also think it's really important as advocates to try to understand the mayor's priority and think about how they fit. Right. So for us, a lot of it was about the perception of the city and about economic growth. And so having a vibrant core to the city in a city that was afraid of more and more people moving away, it's actually part of the case for cycling. But the benefits are so large and so varied that you may have that business focus, you may have a safety focus, you may have a public health focus. It's got a lot to do with climate, right? And so it really depends on the local environment. only other advice I'd give is that, this is a passionate community, and that intensity can be an asset in terms of really propelling, I think, people to get attention. Try to meet people where they are, though, too, because they may not be at your speed, right? So it'll go a long way just to make sure a mayor views you as somebody who can really help them achieve what they're trying to get done too.
Yeah, that's really great advice. Thank you. The role of the DOT in this sort of to build safe networks for everyone, it's going to take integrating biking and walking into all street planning, as you know, as you've done. We in your role as mayor, and we believe that as we said, you can start. There's a role for you to play. Leadership from the top. What will you and your team? How will you approach integrating biking and walking into all of FHWA's programs so that biking and walking aren't an afterthought, but built into every program?
Well, one thing I think is really important is to work with the states. So the truth is sometimes a local community and this department may be closer to each other on questions around bicycle policy than they are to a state highway department, although we're seeing a lot of growth and a lot of change there. So trying to encourage that's going to be, I think, very important to begin with. I think a lot of it is about resources, right? Hard dollars. This is a great time since you're in the season of talking to members on Capitol Hill to let them know about how you believe infrastructure investment in roads is not just about making them bigger, wider, faster, meaner, but about making sure that they are more complete, so that if we get an opportunity to do either repair or replacement or expansion of roads and highways, that it's being done in a way that pays attention to bikes, because a lot of it's just where the dollars go. Some of it's cultural. Right? We're a car country. That's okay. I come from an automaking part of the country, and we're proud of it. But we can definitely be more of a bicycling country. And one of the things we saw on that trip I took with Secretary Fox was that if you just hit a certain tipping point, and it's not much, it's about 2% in terms of the rate of people who commute to work by bike, you tend to see step changes in terms of the safety. Probably because motorists are more conscious and aware of people on bicycles as a matter of routine. So just building up that sense of a culture of cycling, I think, is something that's, I can help, but the more bottom up it is, the better. But what I can say is that whether it's hard resources or whether it's moral support, you're going to see a lot of energy coming from my office and my team to help move things along, because we're just going to be a better, safer, cleaner and greener country the more people have great, safe options to get around on two wheels.
Yeah, that's great. That's great. You're absolutely right. I think mayors have led, and we know that helping bring high quality networks, projects first, but networks is a big part of making that mode shift and increasing people biking more possible. Over a decade, we've been told, for longer than that, but let's just say for a decade, by every transportation secretary, state DOTs, congressional leaders, that safety is the top priority. Yet over the same time, over the same decade, the number of people that have been killed while biking has increased by over 30%, and the number of people killed while walking has increased over 50%. And we know Black and brown people are overrepresented in those numbers. So knowing other countries have reduced fatalities, you've seen some of that, what they've done. What needs to change in the US to actually make the progress to reducing fatalities and injuries for our most vulnerable road users? Like, what are the priorities?
Yeah, it's really distressing to see backsliding on this, especially because other countries and cities are showing that it can be done. I think Oslo actually got to 0 at one point with more than 500,000 people. So we know that it can be done, and like everything else, from passenger rail to electrification, I don't see why America should be anywhere but the best in this area. What's it going to take? I would break it into really two overall areas that we've got to work. One of them is design, the other one's behavior. So on design, Some of it is making sure that there are features in cars, for example, if they can increasingly see the road, let's make sure they can increasingly see bicycles too. So there's the technology on board, but there's also just what we're doing with roadway design itself as we learn more through the data that we do have about how roadway design can impact outcomes, reducing conflict points, having dedicated areas, but also having the right kind of sharing where that's appropriate. Just design that reduces speed, right? We know the danger of speed, and it's not true that faster is always better, especially when we're talking about the roads that go through the hearts of our communities. So that's the kind of design and technology side. Then there's the behavior side, and that kind of splits in two as well, I think. There's the regulation part of it, right? Just making sure that we are vigorously enforcing and where necessary, perhaps tightening the kind of rules that govern how anybody involved in bicycle safety, especially drivers, needs to do their part. But then part of it's more of an incentive side, right? How do we make it easier to make the right choice? And I think we can do a lot there too, whether it's messaging, just information, or whether it's that more kind of cultural work that I've been talking about. All of those things have to happen together. And obviously that includes policy, but it's not limited to policy. And that's part of where your work comes in, not just in terms of persuading policymakers to do good things, but in terms of making sure that broader message gets out into the community.
Yeah, that's really yeah, good to hear. I think you brought up enforcement, and I think it's important. We as a bicycling movement, I think, have been dealing with, I mean, as a country, have been grappling with this. But the role of enforcement in improving bicycling safety, because the role of police conducting traffic stops has played the role that it's played in the killing of Black and brown people. We see infrastructure changes as the long-term solution to traffic safety. Definitely helping the behavior change by, as designing things in that way. So we know that they take a long time. Hopefully we're going to be able to deliver more in a shorter period of time. But speeding and distracted driving are real threats right now to bicyclists and pedestrians and other vulnerable users. So where do you see the balance between enforcement, in infrastructure on traffic safety?
Well, I think the more effective our designs are, the less we need to lean on enforcement. But at the end of the day, this is still about choices, and that's why enforcement matters. And now, as you said, we are at a moment of really reckoning with the ways that enforcement has been used in disparate and detrimental ways, impacting Black and brown Americans in particular. We can't allow that to continue. But what we do need to do is set a really strong baseline on what's accepted and what isn't when it comes to safety. And I think, again, the more we can do that through culture, through incentives, and through design, the less we're dependent on enforcement, though that always needs to be there as a backstop. And when it is, then the most important thing is to make sure it's equitable as well as effective.
Yeah, thanks. Another thing that is big in the moment that we have to meet right now, that we all feel, and we feel as bicyclists, are people that bike and people that walk and use transit. We're part of the solution to fighting the climate crisis. When we talk about climate change and transportation, the conversation often goes to electric vehicles, but what role do you see reducing vehicle miles traveled and playing in your plan to make transportation more sustainable?
Yeah, look, I love electric vehicles. I think it's incredibly exciting. We're working on getting more charging stations out there and making sure that the standards around safety and efficiency are lined up. But it's not enough to make the vehicle more climate friendly. We also need to have alternatives to using a vehicle, and that's what biking, walking, and transit amounts to. One thing I'm particularly concerned about looking past the horizon for electric vehicle adoption is the more you have automated vehicles that you don't have to bother to drive. It takes away one more barrier to being in a vehicle and could actually lead to more cars on the road. So we're in a bit of a race to make sure there are more multimodal options that are not just environmentally beneficial, but just make sense in terms of the way communities are laid out. Knowing that there are very powerful negative correlations between the number of vehicle miles traveled in a given area, and even something like life expectancy. And so there is virtue in itself to getting people out of vehicles, even as the vehicles themselves are becoming more efficient and less emitting.
Yeah, well, we've heard a lot about electric vehicles and from the new administration, and totally get it. Your remarks, 100%. I think this audience is hopeful for that, meaning electric bikes too, as well. So we see so much potential in replacing car trips with bike trips, because electric cars still have an impact on the environment and road safety. How do you see electric bikes fitting into your vision of the future of transportation? And I know we're at time, so I'll let you finish. Yeah.
Yeah, I think, and again, the first time I ever was on an electric bike was actually in the company of Secretary Fox, who was all over these developments, and it seemed pretty newfangled to me. It's incredibly exciting, especially to the extent that it opens up range for commuting. I think it just adds one more reason to consider a bike commute. The other side of the coin, of course, is safety. And so both in terms of the bikes that are on the road and the knowledge of those riding them and anybody else sharing the road with them, we got to make sure that this is safe. But I think we can. And as we do, I think there's a lot to be gained.
Well, we thank you so much for taking this much time with us today, and for your leadership. We look forward to working with you. Can we go on a bike ride sometime? I promise we don't have to talk about seat height at all. Yeah, but but we'd love to ride with you, and we love to help you be more effective in this job. Thanks so much.
Thanks. I'd look forward to that. And in the meantime, thanks again for all your work, and thanks for having me over today.
Our pleasure. All right. So next up, thank you. So next up we have Representative Adriano Espiate. I just want to make sure that Representative Espaillat is here with us today. He is. Great. Awesome. Good. Sorry. The wonders of Zoom. I'm going back and forth between screens. So he proudly, Representative Adriano Espiate proudly represents New York's 13th Congressional District. He is the first Dominican American to serve in the U.S. House of Representatives, and his congressional district includes Harlem, East Harlem, West Harlem, Hamilton Heights, Washington Heights, Inwood, and Marble Hill, and the Northwest Bronx. He was first elected to Congress in 2016 with a focus on improving the lives of middle and working class families. Through his tenure, he has also become a champion of bicycling and walking in the Transportation Committee. He was the original sponsor of both the Transportation Alternatives Enhancement Act and the Safe Streets Act, which we're advocating for today. So it's very, very timely. He also serves on the House Appropriations Committee, which is responsible for funding the government's vital activities to keep the United States safe, strong, and moving forward. Representative Espaillat is also a member of the Congressional Hispanic Caucus, where he serves in a leadership role as the second vice chair, and is member of the Congressional Progressive Caucus, where he serves as the deputy whip. Representative Espaillat also serves as the senior whip of the Democratic Caucus. Through his committee assignments and caucus leadership positions, Representative Espaillat helps advance and amplify legislative priorities and accomplishments that aim to improve the lives of families around the nation. A steadfast champion of working and middle-class New Yorkers, he is a staunch advocate for a fair living wage, immediate and effective investments in affordable housing, meaningful criminal justice reform, infrastructure improvements, expanded youth programs, and better educational opportunities. And we are so happy to have you here today with us. Please, everyone, welcome Representative Adriano Espiate.
Thank you, Bill, for that introduction, and thank all of you for the opportunity to address you during this year's Bike Summit. I want to thank Secretary Buttigieg for being my opening act. But seriously, what a change an election can make, right? We have a Secretary of Transportation here addressing many of our issues of concern. It shows that green modes of transportation like biking will play an important role in the vision of this new administration and infrastructure investment. And I'm happy to hear that President Biden has told folks openly that the next big bill should be like a transportation infrastructure bill. As you all know, I have the privilege in serving in the Transportation Infrastructure committee, and now I'm a member of the THUD subcommittee in appropriations. So I will be directly involved in the funding aspect of any potential future green transportation and congestion reduction efforts. As a state legislator in New York State, I also was a strong supporter of New York's congestion pricing program because I felt it was a good way to sort of like get two birds with one stone, reduce pollution by vehicles in New York City and reduce traffic in the midtown and downtown areas, which are not only good environmentally, but also have a fiscal cost to the economy. But I believe congestion pricing will have had a knock-on effect on encouraging more bicycle use as well. New York has come a long way since then in that regards in a relatively short period of time. I remember when it was deeply unpopular, but now I think many legislators and folks across New York City are supporting that particular initiative. Parts of the city that have been left out by the city bike network were finally included, and I'm happy to see that. But I believe that we need to continue investing in bicycle and pedestrian infrastructure, not just to improve safety, but to make biking a more viable alternative to driving. Especially as COVID-19 has ravaged New York City, many have turned to biking as an alternative public transportation means. And while we do not want to encourage folks to safely return to using our transit system, particularly our subway system, that continues to be the engine of our local economy, I suspect many will continue to bike once the pandemic has finally passed. So we must continue to invest in biking and walking infrastructure, which makes one of my proposals even more critical. When I joined the T&I committee, my staff and I look for opportunities to advance this priority and work with the biking league, the bike league, and others to develop transportation alternatives, the Transportation Alternative Enhancement Act. The proposal will not only provide greater portion of highway funds to biking and pedestrian infrastructure projects, but it would also include mechanisms to ensure states actually use them. I also work with colleagues in introducing complementary proposals such as Complete Streets Act and the Safe Streets Act. Last year, I had the privilege of participating in the Transportation Infrastructure Committee two-day markup on the Invest Act and was so pleased that my bill and components of such other proposals were included. So I will be keenly following that effort this year to ensure that they're finally agreed upon and passed and implemented. So I want to thank you really for all you do for people across my district and for people across the country. I think you are clearly not just part of the future, but you are very much also part of the present. Thank you so much.
Thank you so much, Congressman. I just have a couple of questions. I know you have a vote coming up, so we appreciate your time. Just a few things here. Just big thanks for your leadership on this. And your transportation alternatives bill includes new language to prioritize high need areas like low income and transit dependent communities in the application process. How else should the transportation bill address a history of inequitable investments in transportation infrastructure?
Well, you have these deserts of green, open space, lack of alternative to transportation in communities of color and low income neighborhoods. As such, as I also have adopted a similar view of environmental justice, which is for the most part, poor and Black and brown neighbors contribute less to climate change, yet they're impacted more. So you go to these neighborhoods and you see higher levels of asthma. As such, I think that anytime we adopt any climate change measure, the funding should go to those neighborhoods first. I believe the same model should be followed for this green and bike infrastructure, that those neighborhoods that require the most, that may need it the most, should be addressed and should get the initiatives first. Otherwise, we couldn't run the risk of not having them access the funding for these initiatives. I mean, money does dry it up sometimes, and sometimes these neighborhoods don't get to it on time and are completely left out. They fall right through the cracks. I don't want this to happen with these initiatives.
Yeah, and so your bill really does help address that. Um, your district includes some really very walkable and bikeable areas.
And some tough terrain too. It's called Washington Heights for a reason. Some big hills.
Yeah. All right. Well, yeah. So but also areas of high car congestion, as I've heard.
That's correct. That's
yeah.
correct.
So how do you create safe places to bike and walk, and help like with the better relationship between all road users in your district? And
I think you got to be smart.
Yeah.
You got to be smart. You got to engage the local businesses. I think that one size doesn't fit all. We got to really go to the community. And by that, I don't just mean the community board, which is sometimes very insular in the way they handle business, but by non-traditional communities that often don't engage people like the community board members, right? But are impacted favorably or unfavorably by any initiative that's implemented. So I believe in going to the churches. I believe in going into the local business association. I believe in talking to parent associations. I believe in going to the non-traditional means of or avenues of discussion, because people just, for the most part, have a hard time making ends meet, and sometimes they have two jobs and they can't get to that community board meeting and engaging them so that you can have an input from them, so that everyone wins. Small business person wins. The mom who walks her child to school in the morning wins. Folks that want to bike to work win. And ultimately, that I think will reduce traffic going downtown, which is, I think, the real challenge, right?
Yeah. It's really great to hear you say that. I think that's right. At least from what we've seen in communities around the country that have done this sort of thing, is you have to, it can't just be one group. I mean, you have to have, this has to be about, not just about biking or walking. It has to be about
Everybody, yeah.
improving people's lives, right? And
Right.
making lives better for everybody. So so thanks for your leadership on that. That's really good advice to everyone. So last question, I know you got to go. Last year, the U.S. disassociated itself from the Stockholm Declaration on Road Safety that referenced climate change, saying those issues are not directly related to road safety. What role do you see transportation in addressing climate change?
I think it's very important. It's right at the center, obviously. These emissions are just off the hook, right? And we got to do everything we can to lower them dramatically. And so, to me, congestion pricing is an important tool. I always say it, that if you're driving in from Rockland County, my district, outside of my district, or West, I don't want to pick on them, but or Westchester County, and you're going down in your Beamer or your Lexus downtown, that's a luxury. You should have to pay for that. And upping $8, for congestion pricing is not a backbreaker, particularly when you got to pay $40, $50, $60 to garage your car, right? You got to gas up and pay the tolls. So an additional $8 that will go towards initiatives like the one I'm supporting, better green and biking infrastructure, and our public transportation system, which is deeply underfunded right now. I may warn you that right now the MTA is in dire straits because it works on a strap hanger, sort of like formula, and they're not getting that revenue. But to keep that juggernaut moving requires money, and so they have this structural deficit that we're trying to address. And so, in order to do that, we must have a secure, funding stream. And I think that congestion pricing is a good one.
Yeah. Well, that's really appreciate your remarks on this. Last question. Any final advice for people as they're up on the Hill? So bike advocates thinking more broadly, they're meeting their members of Congress today for the rest of the day. Any final words of encouragement or advice?
Keep on doing what you're doing. You're pedaling your way home. So, and I'm with you.
Oh, that's great. Well,
I gotta go. I'm sorry.
We're happy to be with you. Thank you so much.
Thank you.
All right.
Have a nice day.
Well, you too. I'm really excited for our final speaker of the day, but also very excited to introduce Karen Whitaker, who's going to give us an update on what's going on the Hill right now. We have a little bit of a break between speakers, so we have our Deputy Executive Director, Karen Whitaker, to give us an update on stuff on the Hill and also answer some of your questions.
Hi. Yeah. Hey, everyone. Hope your day is going well. Definitely here to see if folks have any questions. I'm really excited by this lineup. You know, we have some of the folks like Chairman DeFazio and Earl Blumenauer on Monday who've been doing this forever. And today we're seeing some new folks with Secretary Buttigieg coming in and Mr. Espaillat, who's, you know, I guess this is his third session. So, and he's just taken the lead on all of our issues in the House. And so that's been really great to see. I'm hearing that the meetings are going well. I know you're maybe getting some questions. I'm here on email. Cecily's here on email. You can even put some questions in the Q&A. But questions that you don't know how to answer are always a great opportunity, a great excuse to contact those staffers and those members of Congress after. So got a question about where to send the lobby reports. You can send it to me or to Cecily or to both of us. And I'd also just let folks know that there's some other things happening on the Hill today. Polly Trottenberg was going through her nomination hearing. For folks who don't know who she was the City of New York's transportation director through last year, but she had also been at USDOT under Secretary LaHood. So again, it's nice to have another friendly face in the USDOT. She'll be the #2 person to Secretary Buttigieg. And also sort of comes at it now from a view of knowing the difficulties cities sometimes have implementing federal policy. So I think having her there will be great. All right, I got another question. HR 463 has been introduced. That's the Transportation Alternatives bill in the House that Mr. Espaillat is a sponsor of. And then in the Senate, that bill is in the process of being introduced, but it usually takes almost a week from when it gets introduced to when we get a bill number. And
I'm looking to see if there's any questions coming in also, just in case, through the app, you know, but I'm here for you.
Got a couple more. So the House bills, yeah. So there's a question of these bills, are they under the infrastructure, the larger HR2 or the larger transportation reauthorization? And the answer is yes. The larger transportation reauthorization is the big bill. It includes all the transit programs. It includes the rail programs. It's going to include the congestion programs and the highway programs and transportation alternatives. The bills that we're doing today are called marker bills. So we're trying to pull out a piece of that larger bill and basically mark some changes in it that we'd like to see and to elevate it to the leaders in Congress that, hey, this needs some changes. Yeah, so that's the goal. And in both House and Senate, it's the same. So with transportation alternatives, we're basically asking for the same bill in both chambers, so that if the two bills pass the House and the Senate, there's no negotiation. We get everything we want in both bills. Yeah. Oh, the other thing that was happening this morning was that the American Society of Civil Engineers, they did their State of America's Infrastructure, and I think we got a C- as a country, but they do reports based on every state. And so this is a great day to be on the Hill, because a lot of well, both of the chairmen will be there. Secretary Buttigieg was there this morning. Other transportation leaders will be there. Our friend Christina Swallow, who's the Secretary of Nevada, she was there. So everyone's thinking about infrastructure right now, and this is a good time to say, yes, we need to invest in infrastructure, but that investment needs to include biking and walking infrastructure as well. So
What do I say when I'm asked about the e-bike bill? Do you see that one?
I did. So one thing here's how I'm going to say it. So if you asked about the e-bike bill, say we support it, but we're focused on transportation, the transportation reauthorization process, where all of our marker bills fit under, because that has a deadline. The senators need to get their comments into leadership by the 19th. So we're focused on that. I've talked a little bit about Lobby 201 that we're going to start in April. That's going to be the time to start talking about some of these other bills. Remember, the e-bike bill goes to a different committee. It doesn't go to the Transportation Committee. And so you actually, in many cases, would have to meet with a different staffer. I see that Senator Heinrich from New Mexico joined their meeting, and he's going to co-sponsor. All right, so we already got a supporter. Thank you. I got a question about the larger bill. The larger bill is the transportation reauthorization. So this country's had a transportation bill since Eisenhower, since the 50s, but every 5 to 6 years, it has to be redone and updated. And that's called the reauthorization process. So that's the larger bill. In our bills, we're trying to pull out the pieces that we want to change to and mark that and put that forward to get changes. Our goal is to get our changes into that larger bill. All right. So we got a question. How can we help with input on the MUTCD? That's a great question. The MUTCD, the Manual of Unified Traffic Control Devices. So that sort of sets requirements so that every state has the same stop sign, all those things are in there. But it also includes guidance on how states can set speed limits, and some which we don't love, and some other things that we'd like to change. And I would say that, so as the secretary mentioned, they're going to look at updates for that, and they're going to be asking for comments. The league is going to be commenting, and we will put out an action alert where you can also either say you support ours or look at what we did and put in your own personal comments.
I should add to that also, Karen, if you don't mind, that there's a session this afternoon on it as well. So the league has representatives on the National Committee for Uniform Traffic Control Devices. So that's the NTUTCD, which makes the MUTCD. So or comments on it. So there's a conversation today at 2:15. If you're not meeting with your members of Congress during that time.
Okay. I got a question. What's the likelihood of major media coverage of Secretary Pete's appearance and talks here? I think we're more likely to see his comments coming out of the American Society of Civil Engineers. That's a little bit bigger, but I do think we may get some coverage under Politico or some of the Hill news, or hopefully some of the bike blogs, things like that. I see a message that Congressman Mike Thompson will co-sponsor both. Hey, great news, more co-sponsors. I'll also say that Congressman Mike Thompson is going to be joining us for the reception later today. And I think that's really exciting. We mentioned the e-bike bill. Mike Thompson is in a leadership position on the Ways and Means Committee, which is the tax committee. And so he has been looking for ways to use the tax code to help with building biking and walking infrastructure. He's got a really exciting idea that could help with building trails in particular. But he's also on the committee that included the bicycle commuter benefit in last year's bill. Now we just need to get that into the Senate bill and get that bill to pass. But he's also on the committee that's going to talk about the e-bike piece. So we're looking forward to hearing him give a few minutes tonight at our closing reception class / happy hour. So I hope you all can join with that. So I also see that there was some meetings with Rohana, and he's interested in co-sponsoring our bills, and emphasized bipartisan brings us all together. So great to see that. You guys are, you're already making a difference. So here's an interesting question. In Massachusetts, they got a question of, can you put this in an appropriations ask? And that's an interesting piece. And what that is getting to is a couple of things. One, there's a possibility that earmarks will come back, which is where a member of Congress can specifically put in, get some funding for a specific project. It's not for sure yet, but do, stay on the email. I'm doing federal policy webinars almost every month, and I'll update you on that and how to do that, how to get and ask for that. The other piece is in terms of stimulus. And so right now, Congress has been telling me, let us finish this first relief bill, and then we'll turn to a recovery bill. And for that, we'll look for funding of biking and walking networks. So what I would say is, if you can get a dollar amount on a bike network in a city or community in your state, maybe they have it in their plan, that's the most likely place. Getting that together, that's the kind of thing you can put in an appropriations ask. Got a question about the Bike Caucus. Does it work with the League? Yes, it definitely does. We do a lot of events with them. They also work with other bike groups. We all work together. But that's a great opportunity. If you have a member of Congress who's not going to sponsor the bills, we like to push the bills because that's sort of the harder ask and it means more. But you can also invite them to do the Bike Caucus. And if you've already had your meeting, that's something that you can put in your follow-up email. All right, looks like Representative Garamendi is going to co-sponsor, which is great. He did. And we see that Buttigieg's appearance was mentioned in today's bicycle retailers news. So got some local news. Carper is co-sponsoring both bills. Great. And and is looking at some of the other bills that we're supportive of too. That's great. Got a vote for the Idaho stop. We definitely, the League supports that. That's a state level issue. And we've worked with folks at the state level to get that done. Got another comment on MUTCD changes. And yeah, appreciate that. I think I'm not sure if we have it up on the blog now, but I do know that Ken McLeod has been leading our work on that and has some draft comments. So I would look for those. Okay. Got a question on our emails. It's caron@bikeleague.org, excuse me. And I think, yeah, Amelia's typing an answer. I can see that right now. Let's see. So I think we will have, oh, I do see that the chairman has joined us. So Bill, I'll turn it over to you for an introduction.
Thanks so much, Karen. And thanks everybody for those questions and all the great news from the Hill. So yeah, so we've spoken about this historic moment that we have and that we're in this great opportunity, a greater opportunity than ever before to get the investments and policy changes to transform our communities with national and global impacts. Bicycling is part of the solution to the crises we face together. We have a champion at all levels, including the chair people of the two most important committees of our issue in Congress. We heard from Chairman DeFazio on Monday. Today, we will hear from Chairman Tom Carper. Senator Carper has been in public service since 1976, including as a congressman and a governor before coming to the Senate in 2001. In his time as a U.S. Senator, Senator Carper has worked extensively on reforming our healthcare system, improving our environment, and ensuring that federal programs are run efficiently and effectively. In 2019, as ranking member of the Environment and Public Works Committee, Senator Carper successfully advocated for the first ever climate title in a transportation reauthorization bill. It's big. This bipartisan bill also included the first ever program to specifically and directly require states to address bicycling and walking safety. This year, now as chairman of the committee, Senator Carper has pledged to pass a bill that will further address climate change, safety, and innovation. During more than 30 years of public service, Senator Carper has worked tirelessly to develop practical solutions to real problems. His ability to work across party lines has earned him the reputation for consensus building that is unique in today's political climate. The Washington Post's late David Broder calls him a notably effective and nonpartisan leader, admired and trusted on both sides of the aisle. And that is so great to have. We are so pleased to welcome Senator Carper and present him with the 2020 Legislator of the Year Award. It took us a year to give you this. This award is recognition of Senator Carper's leadership in drafting the American Transportation Infrastructure Act and to include significant new provisions on biking and walking infrastructure and safety. The League of American Bicyclists mission is to build a bicycle-friendly America for everyone. And we work with individuals, communities, businesses, 1,200 state and local partner organizations, including Bike Delaware, to make bicycling safe, comfortable, and accessible to all, of people of all ages and abilities. With legislators like you leading on federal policy, we are making progress towards realizing that vision. So please join me in welcoming Senator Tom Carper, Chairman Tom Carper, and congratulating him on this big award.
Thank you. Thanks so much, Bill. I'm honored to accept the award on behalf of a lot of the people, staff, and members who worked on the legislation that you just referred to. We're very pleased with it. As most things, a team effort. There's an irony here that I would be receiving this award on behalf of the League of American Bicyclists. Literally, I've not been on a bicycle since, what is this? This is like 2021. I've literally not been on a bicycle since yesterday. How about that? And when I was a little boy, one of my most exciting moments was getting my first bicycle. It was a badly used, worn. We lived in West Virginia, a coal mining town, and I was pleased to have any kind of bicycle. I remember my dad, when we moved to Virginia, my dad got me an old kind of, I guess it had been an English racing bike, but it had no handles for brakes or gears or anything like that. It was an old bike. I just remember it had huge tires, skinny tires, and I remember getting on the bike, and then my sister and I just moved to Danville, Virginia, and right on the North Carolina border. And we've been invited by some of our new neighbors, kids in the neighborhood, to be in to go for a bicycle race on Brown Lane, a block or two from our house. And so we got really excited, and it's probably about a quarter of a mile, half a mile from top to bottom, and we took off. Me and my new bike. It was an old bike, but I was about halfway through the race, and things were going great, and until I hit a rock right in the middle of the Brown Lane and lost control of the bike. headfirst into a parked car, into a hospital, concussion, and several days that I finally got better and they let me go home. And 2 or 3 years later, I fell out of my grandfather's back seat of his car in West Virginia. Stopped at a stoplight, and I fell out playing with my sister on the door handle. And they gathered me up. I cried and finally got home. And years later, my mom would say to me, "We always wondered if that bicycle accident." My parents were Republicans. I ended up running for state treasurer as a Democrat in Delaware at 29, and won. And but my mother said later, she said, "We always wondered if you had suffered brain damage from that bicycle accident or flying out of your grandfather's car." And then when they found that I was a Republican, or I was a Democrat, my Republican parents said, "Now we're convinced that you did sustain permanent damage." But having said that, I love bicycles, love them. And I have a son, Christopher, who loves bicycles, lives in San Francisco, rides many, many weekends up into the county just north of San Francisco on his bike. And we have a bike that hangs in my garage that he rides sometimes. And he comes home, stays with us some in this COVID situation, which is great. And he always likes to go out for a bicycle ride, a great bicycle ride that goes from Wilmington, Delaware to Newcastle, Delaware, state's first capital ride on the Delaware River. But on a beautiful fall day about a year and a half ago, I'm on a thing when I was a naval flight officer for 23 years. And I was Southeast, last Vietnam veteran serving in the U.S. Senate. We flew a lot of missions all over the world, but a lot in Southeast Asia. I would take my bicycle, swing 10-speed and the yellow, and it would go with me everywhere. A big plane, and we get to our destination, we jump off, I get on my bike and go for a ride. And so I still, even to this day, I love bicycles. And for those of you who do and who've been very loud and vocal and supportive of those of us who also support them and those who ride them, thank you very, very much. But on a beautiful fall day, about a year and a half ago, I joined mayors and other local leaders from around the state of Delaware. We're in Wilmington, Delaware, right? You know where, for anybody who happened to watch the presidential campaign, Joe Biden was always doing things from the riverfront. And the riverfront in Delaware, which has just been for transformation of the industrial wasteland into a great place. There's a bike path that goes from right there that I worked to help get federal funding for, and who goes from Wilmington, Delaware, right along the Christina River, beautiful ride, and about 7 miles each way, back and forth. And we opened a couple of years ago the tree, and it makes a long-awaited connection between the Wilmington riverfront and Newcastle's Battery Park. Newcastle, the first capital of the state of Delaware. And according to our state's Department of Transportation, up to 5,000 pedestrian and cyclists use those trails. Trail I just mentioned every week, and that's a lot of people for a little state like Delaware. That's 5,000 people who are not driving cars that contribute to air pollution and road congestion in our area. It's 5,000 people who are exercising, who are living healthy lives and taking a safe mode of transportation. It's pathways and bridges on this path that take us through wetlands, a wildlife refuge in the bustling area along the banks of the Christina River, which is named after a child queen of Sweden who, about 380 years ago, the first Swedes and Finns came to Delaware, came to America, right there on the Christina River, where our pathway was. So there's a lot of history there as well. But I was not joining our mayors and everybody, the former governor, Jack Markell, just for the sites on the trail. I was also there to highlight what kind of projects are possible throughout Delaware and throughout our country if the federal government increases its commitment to non-motorized transit options. I talked mainly that day about America's Transportation Infrastructure Act, known as ATIA. I never call it ATIA, but America's Transportation Infrastructure Act, a major multi-year service transportation reauthorization bill that I was proud to co-author, that passed out of the Environment and Public Works Committee of the Senate earlier that summer on a 21-0 vote, unanimous vote. We don't do much of anything unanimously in Washington these days, but we certainly reported that legislation out unanimously. This legislation made desperately needed upgrades to pedestrian and cycling safety in an effort to combat the growing crisis of non-motorist fatalities on our roadways. Is a particularly severe problem in my state, which in 2015 was found to have the highest rate of pedestrian fatalities in the nation. That's not something you can be proud of. The package increased funding for pedestrian and bicycle infrastructure, invested about $6.2 billion nationally through the U.S. DOT's Transportation Alternatives Program, and provided an additional $2.5 billion for safety improvements in places where these fatalities are happening most frequently. Unfortunately, our committee's partners throughout the Senate were not able to advance their portions of the bills. Four committees have to act on surface transportation to get the job done. We're one of them. We do roads, highways, bridges in my committee. The Commerce Committee does safety and rail. The Banking Committee does transit. Finance Committee figures out how to pay for this. We're the only committee that acted unanimously, waited for a year and a half for the other committees to do something. They didn't. Now we get to start all over again. So just last week, some new Congress, our ranking member on the Environment Public Works Committee, Shelley Capito from West Virginia, my native state, and I held a kickoff hearing on this year's Surface Transportation Reauthorization legislation. This bill should, I think, ambitiously make long overdue repairs to our roads and to our bridge systems, and do so in a way that creates high-paying American jobs as we claw our way out of this recession. And that end of the recession, I think, may come sooner than not. We're hearing encouraging words out of the mouths of a lot of economists, people smarter than me. But I know that it's not enough just to fix what's broken. In the words of President Biden, we need to build back better. And for the long haul, to address issues like climate change, like public health, and like the roadway safety. That means building electric vehicle charging infrastructure across our country, and making the carbon reduction that will help us achieve zero emissions in the transportation sector by the year 2050. Mary Barrows, the chairman, CEO of General Motors, and she said to me not long ago, she said, we're all into electric. We're going to do all kinds of electric vehicles. Not build any more gas and diesel powered vehicles starting in 2035. She said we need charging stations for electric vehicles. We need fueling stations for hydrogen powered vehicles. So that's part of what we'll do in our transportation legislation when we pass it. Importantly, this is also where non-motorized transportation options like paths for bicycles or pedestrians come into play. More than 20% of all vehicle trips are 1 mile or shorter. Think of that. Over more than 20%, I had to read this again, more than 20% of all vehicle trips are 1 mile or shorter. That's pretty amazing. And could easily be substituted for pollution-free cycling or just walking, in some cases running. But local and state governments need more active participation, need more active partnerships to make those safe connections possible and more affordable. As we continue to craft this year's service transportation bill for committees I talked about before, I intend to build on the success of Whitaker's last bill and push hard toward making cycling a safer, more efficient option for folks throughout our country. Cyclists know this better than most. Poor infrastructure can be pretty easy to notice. We notice it when a pothole damages our car, when a bus is running late. We notice it when cars and trucks pollute our neighborhoods. And for this particular group that I am privileged to address today, we can always tell when a lack of pathways cut bicycle or pedestrian access off or make it more dangerous to get from point A. So is there any good news in all this? Yes, it turns out there is. And here it is. These problems are fixable if we as policymakers make the commitments we need to make. On infrastructure and so many other issues, we have a unique opportunity before us, and I'm ready to work together, not just with the Biden administration, not just with Republicans, not with just Democrats, but with groups, including the groups I'm privileged to address today, to seize this momentum and to shift our economy into high gear. We have a saying in Delaware, some of you heard the saying, it says, I don't know much Latin, but 2 words I know, carpe diem, seize the day, carpe diem. In Delaware, we say it just a little bit different. Carper diem. Carper diem. But there's a great opportunity here for us to seize the day and get her done. And that's what we like to do in Delaware. And fortunately, that's the spirit we have in our Committee on Environment and Public Works. I'm privileged to be their chairman, and we look forward to working with all of you to get her done. God bless you all. Thank you so much.
Thanks so much, Chairman. It's we really appreciate you coming over here and rushing over. It's a hugely busy day, but how it means so much to us to have you doing what you're doing and to be working with you and riding with you. And thanks for your inspiration. And we hope to get it done.
Thank you so much.
Together. Yeah.
Yeah. Take care. God bless.
You
See you,
too.
Bill. Thanks to everybody.
All right. Thanks, everyone. On to your next meetings. Really appreciate you and being here for this whole session and everything you're doing on the Hill. See you later.